Superfly, to me, is the best movie of that era.
This is Fly, that's Fly, but I think, okay, this is the movie, this is Superfly.
You always got some Superfly shit.
Superfly I've always interpreted as being something that is heightened achievement.
Things that were great, that's Fly this and the Fly that, it was right on.
I'm not sure it's a noun or adjective.
It just sounded right, it was right.
Your fashion, your achievement, whatever, it's rarefied.
So you had, in the late 60s, really a sort of minimal slate of black films, with the exception of Sidney Poitier, who, of course, was a major box office star at the time.
The prospect for, I guess, black artists working in Hollywood in the late 60s and 70s was better than it had been in previous decades, all due to the changes that were taking place in American society because of the 1960s and the Civil Rights Movement.
In many ways, the movies of the 50s and into the early, and the 60s really, were movies that made cases for the integration of African Americans into a larger American society. But I think that what happened in the late 60s, when the climate switched and the campaign for human rights became more militant, then that kind of pleading, that kind of morality play was abandoned for much more aggressive statements. And the movies of the 70s were this reflection of the militancy of the times.
It started with Van Peebles' Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, which was one of the first black independent film productions.
He went out and made a movie that generated so much revenue as per the production dollar, or against the production dollar spent, that it literally made the industry sit up overnight and said, my God, there's a audience of black people out there that will pay to see movies about black people. Now, how they managed to overlook that for all the years since the inception of the business remains to be explained.
When Sweetback came out and Shaft and then Superfly, the era changed, and subsequently you had, Blaxploitation film.
The studios began to hire black filmmakers. The studios began to make a genre of films that particularly catered to black urban audiences.
We've always said that we saved the studios back in the 70s because they weren't making a damn thing, from what I understand. And the black films came out and started making money, and the studio said, oops, let us get on this bandwagon.
The success that Gordon Parks Sr. achieved in the world of photojournalism, and then with the successful release of The Learning Tree in 1969, occasioned what Hollywood is very familiar with, which is an example of nepotism. And his son was able then to come into the movie industry and make his film debut with Superfly 3 years after The Learning Tree.
What kind of money are we talking about?
Well, not much.
I guess it did begin with me, actually. I was working in advertising. Gordon and I were very close friends at that time. And Gordon's father had just finished Shaft. So there was a lot of buzz about that. This was where we wanted to go, films was what we wanted to do. New York at that time, in the late 60s and early 70s, was unbelievable. It was just an incredible place to be. It was just a tremendous creative energy. Broadway has been sort of totally given over to street people. And it was exciting, interesting subculture that I knew not that much about. I started hanging out with the guys. I started spending time with them. My friend Nate Adams had an employment agency on 125th Street in Harlem.
And he stopped by and we were talking, and he said he had an idea about a film. And being in Harlem and being a black man owning a business in Harlem, had a kind of a good picture of what was happening on the streets as well as what was happening in the business world. We sat down, we talked, and he started writing some notes, and from that point, he asked me if I would get involved with him in making some introductions and as he developed this project.
When you start spending time with these guys, and after you get over the glamour of it and what you think is glamour of it, you start to see the harder side of it, and that most of these guys don't want to be doing this. This is not, something they elect to do. Although the life becomes very seductive once you get into it. It's sort of hard to turn away from it, too.
I thought the concept had a lot of validity, and that we could possibly, be very raw and yet have a very new concept to what was happening out there in the drug scene,
Like I said, the life was very, very attractive then, and it was getting a lot of play. I mean, New York Magazine had just done pieces on cocaine dealers and pimps and things like that, so it was coming into the mainstream, and it was the right place to be. It was the right genre to do something about. We needed a producer, and Sig had just gotten back from Rome, where he had bought a picture called Black Jesus.
At that particular time, I would bring European films over to America for distribution, theatrical distribution.
And he was looking for something, and we walked in at just the right time. Sig, immediately said, "Let's do this."
Philip, and he had known about Sig, and that he had, that he had the tenacity to try to take this thing, all the way.
Sig was ideal for this. He knew the market. He knew how to get things done. He knew how to hustle. He knew how to put together an independent project, and with no money, and that's what we needed.
That was not easy. People would say, "Well, you got a script?" And I'd say, "Well, yeah, I have. It was 45 pages long." They'd say, "Well, this isn't a feature, this is a short subject or something." And say, no, this is a feature.
We got the bulk of the money from two black dentists who happened to live in Stanford, where Sig lived.
They put up $53,000. And then Gordon Parks, his father, loaned us some money. Gordon Sr., maybe $5,000. It was really a struggle from the very beginning. Gordon had some friends that were actors. Philip knew Ron. That's how we got Ron involved, because Phil and Ron both were from Cleveland.
Ron O'Neill and I had gone to school together. He's a trained actor, Shakespearean actor primarily.
I know he's always had Hollywood, image. I mean, Ron was always a good-looking guy. He was this handsome guy in our neighborhood. So when he mentioned Ron as a possible, star of this, it even brought about, I think, a stronger sense that this maybe had some legs to it.
The first time I saw Ron was doing a play in Greenwich Village, and I was like, who is that cute guy? God, he is so gorgeous. And the fact that I would be able to work opposite him was just like, a dream come true. But Ron is a brilliant actor. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant actor.
This man could do Shakespeare. And he had the look, the behavior that went with that character and took it to a whole other level.
Now, you don't get me my money tonight. I'm gonna put that young girl of yours out on Horse Road.
Listen, Prince, that's my wife you talking about, man.
So what? Now, somebody's going to work tonight, Freddie.
He understood what a guy in that position is doing, and he really understood what that part was all about, and he could do that very well.
He was a consummate professional. It was a pleasure working with him, believe me.
Carl Lee was absolutely superb in terms of being the back for Ronnie.
Carl, another brilliant actor, son of the great Canada Lee.
Carl was a rebel.
8-track stereo, color TV in every room, and can snort a half a piece of dope every day. It's the American dream, nigga. Well, ain't it?
Sheila Frazier, I remember when she read and everyone just fell in love with her.
Sheila just walked in like an angel and was perfect. I mean, she looked perfect. She sounded perfect. She only had 3 or 4 scenes, but she came off through the whole piece like she really was the leading lady.
That's all I gotta say. Yummy.
This role, Scatter, we kind of gave him the background on who he was and his influence out there in the street. And Julius picked it up. He chewed it up. I mean, he took it and owned it.
Gordon Parks Jr. called me and wanted to know if I wanted to do it. I said, hey, why not? No, I can be a bad cat, just bring a little of the street that I know.
Gordon was a wonderful director to work with. Whatever was true and honest to the character, that's what he was looking for. He was a photographer, so he understood the visual medium.
Charles McGregor had not been out of jail for very long when he got that part. And he was really a good guy. He could give us pointers on how to, pat people down and what they would say and stuff like that. Charlie was in it, so he knew it very well.
Charlie is one of the most interesting profiles in life you ever want to meet. We were at a social. He said, I don't know, he said, I must be changed. Because there were years, man, I'd be casing a place out like this, getting ready to come back to rob it after everybody. But he would give you his background so you can see the redeeming character this man has become.
I liked him very much. Freddie's dead. He was Freddie. Fat Freddie.
So he was really trying to play like a little sap, but I wasn't, that really wasn't Charlie, He was tough to the core, And I can remember sitting in the shoeshine parlor in the Teresa Hotel, the Teresa Towers, and a gentleman pulled up with this black Cadillac Eldorado with these big headlights. This gentleman walked in and he was slick as he wanted to be, and a guy by the name of KC. And when he walked in, he sat down next to me up on the rack. I'm getting my shoe signed, So I looked at him and I said, man, that's a bad car. That's a bad ride, I said, we're thinking about doing a movie, and I'd like to, maybe let them look at your car to use it in the movie. He said, yeah, man, that's slick, It's like, hey, that's about far. He said, so he gave me his number. It took me 3 weeks to get in touch with it. And then consequently, when we finally talked, he said, man, ain't no niggas making no movies. What you think you jeffing me or something, So everybody agreed. That was a ride. He had a Superfly ride.
KC was a good customer, but I didn't really build the car for the movie. The car was a style and it was a trend. He wanted the bumper guards, the extra protection in the front, Rolls-style cap and large grille. And, of course, it had to have the Superfly lights. If it didn't look like Casey's car, it wasn't an Eldorado.
He gave us the car and, to use it in the picture. We said, let's put Casey in the picture because Casey was wonderful. When we ran out of money, Casey would just buy him some food. He would buy food. He had his own wardrobe, and he knew what to say. He was great to have on set. Really brought the energy up a lot.
Here's KC in the movie. It gave the movie that sense of realism, that sense of authenticity. People in the streets may have known KC. When they saw him on screen, it gave that movie credibility.
The people behind the camera, Philip Fente, Gordon Parks Jr., etc., and of course the incredible cast, they all brought this kind of authentic expression. When you don't have the studio influence, then the expression can be more authentic. And I think that's why the movie, again, had that kind of resonance then and still now.
I had an affinity toward clothes. I love clothes. And Gordon said, man, why don't you do the fashion? Now, I'd never done a movie before. I'd coordinated some fashion shows. I didn't have a wardrobe budget. No, that was out of the question. I knew that certain people, they would give me clothing. That's how I really got a lot of the clothing. Then other gentlemen who were involved in the film, they would kind of present what clothes they had, and then I would augment it with some pieces, and everybody would approve, we'd move from there.
Nate, he provided the wardrobe for the guys, and not for myself. I provided my own wardrobe in the film.
She had this white mink, that put her into a real superstar status when she walked across that screen.
It was fly to have the long maxi coat and and the lapels and the flare and whatnot.
Priest's outfits I thought were pretty fly. Maxi coat with a fedora. To him, that's like a business suit. I'm telling you, a lot of that stuff was just over the top. It was big. It was bold. How big can a collar really get?
It brought about an attitude that people, felt when they were wearing, that style.
A lot of these tailors were doing great business because not only were the hustlers using them, but you also had people that had normal jobs that still wanted to look this part. They wanted to be cool. They wanted to look like what they saw in the movies.
In many ways, it allowed a regional cultural expression become a national cultural expression. Everybody who was of a certain age and a certain aspiration began to get the hats. I had my hat. I still got my hat. I almost wore it today.
Even with priests with hairstyles. I mean, there was a hairstyle where, we had press and curls, and you called it the Lord Jesus.
All of the men were getting their hair straightened, and to look like Ron.
His character definitely had an impact on the African American community, definitely.
When you shoot a picture like this, you're very flexible. If you can't get in someplace, or if you get thrown off of a corner, you can't just fold it and wait for tomorrow. You got to find something else you can get.
We shot on Park Avenue.
Cops on one corner, we go on the other. Cast and crew was pulling cable and carrying cameras and everything else. Fighting the gangs. They wanted their little taste. You in my neighborhood? Come on, baby, cough up. But we were all street cats too. We said no.
I had a little Volkswagen convertible, which I'd gotten. I've forgotten how I got it, but it was a relatively new car that we used for a unit car, and it was totally destroyed, in the process.
It was down and dirty. They had to stop shooting at times because they ran out of money.
If you got a budget, okay, break, let's go have a Coke or something, So then you come back with a different attitude. But we didn't have anything but raw bones and guts, man. It was, we don't have time, we don't have the luxury of saying we can maybe shoot this scene over, but we just kept cutting through. We just kept treading through the project.
It never occurred to me that I was not going to complete the film. It occurred to a lot of other people, but it never occurred to me.
That we got through it all, that in itself, for the core of us, was really quite something, just to have finished it. We had a lot of ideas on who we thought, and Curtis was certainly on our A list, but whether or not we could get Curtis to do it for no money and all the rest of this stuff, was something else.
He wanted to see the screenplay, so we sent him all 45 pages, and he loved the story.
And I was telling him, I said, man, Curtis is a natural fit. I said, man, he has an affinity toward this street hustler, this drug hustler scene.
Curtis loved the idea of doing it. Curtis came and met with Gordon and myself and Sig, and we talked about the piece. I spent a lot of time with Curtis talking about what it was about and the kinds of scenes and stuff we wanted.
He got back to Chicago, and he had Pusher Man in the can. He had Freddie's Dead already composed. He just didn't have it as Freddie's Dead, When he came into the equation, I knew that we had something rolling.
See, he would work on it the night before, bring it in on tape, and while we were working, we could hear the music. Get ready to shoot. Curtis would turn on the music, and we shot in a bar. We have a little beer or two, or whatever we wanted to drink, and in and out.
Ain't I clean, bad machine, super cool, super mean, feeling good for the man, Superfly, here I stand.
Curtis brought so much to it, and in terms of his own life and what he had lived through himself. He brought so much.
The songs that Curtis created, you could almost duplicate them in every inner city throughout this country during that time. This was the perfect marriage of music and the visual medium.
The soundtrack is giving you clues, letting the audience know, okay, here's the people we're watching. This is who they are. This is what their motivations are. This is what their goals are.
His soundtrack tells a story, and it talks about the struggle of a dealer and trying to score and trying to get out.
It was the top album and the top single all over the place.
It's remixed, it's sampled, It's just incredible.
Gordon Parks Jr. allowed him the opportunity to not compromise his art as a musician. Gordon Parks Jr. clearly allowed Curtis Mayfield to write the kinds of music that Curtis Mayfield had been used to writing all along, the kind of music that spoke to the condition of Black America in serious and artful ways.
He was just a wonderful, wonderful man. And he did I think, just an extraordinary soundtrack, and the soundtrack was one of the things that really made the picture.
By now, I've got the picture finished, but I'm totally flat broke. I go out to California with the print.
When Signet went out to try to sell the film, it was tough. We had to get had to pull some things together. He was sleeping at Gordon's sister's house, and we were doing a lot of things just to make ends meet, to make sure this thing would happen.
The first sneak preview that Warner Brothers had was in Westwood, and it got, so-so, nothing special. And I said, well, what the hell did you expect in that theater? This all white bread time. So the next picture they screened it with was with Shaft in Philadelphia, at the Fox Theater in Philadelphia. Of everybody that came out, they were all raves.
The picture was open on Broadway, and so we decided we would go down and watch the lines for the movie. They ran out of tickets, but there was still a lot of line left. And somebody went around to the side of the building and they broke the door open to the side of the building. And you saw this mass of people, with police trying to stop them, breaking into the theater to see this movie. And that was a very, very high moment for Gordon and myself to watch that. That was our little picture. And people were actually breaking into the movies to see it.
I remember in the theater in St. Louis, Missouri in 1972, when that scene came, because the climax was when he told the man off. He says, if he so much chokes on a chicken bone, what would happen? And the entire theater, including myself, we leaped to our feet and we stood and screamed and applauded and clapped our hands and stomped our feet. That is a tremendous, tremendous accomplishment. And that's why now, 30 years from now, we're still sitting in the room talking about Superfly, because it connected psychically with a people at a perfect place and time to provide that kind of catharsis.
To me, the theme was, embodied in Mayfield's soundtrack, trying to get over. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to get over. I don't mean no harm. This is the game that the man left me, and I'm trying to break away. And, when I think about that as a metaphor for life in America, for a black man. Where do you go? What do you do? How do you make this system that was set up, without you in mind, work now that you're a part of it?
What had disturbed me after Superfly was that a lot of people judged the film as a film that endorsed cocaine or the use of drugs. The bigger picture was that it was a film where this person was trying to find a different life. They wanted to get out of it.
Well, I know a lot of people look at it and dismiss it, and they think, the clothes are outdated and the car's outdated and it's such a relic. But they're missing the point, because that movie was serious, stylistically and thematically. And at the end, Ron O'Neal basically tells the white man to kiss his ass and walks off and jumps in his tricked out hog. I mean, that's John Wayne riding off in the sunset for black people.
It told us that our experience was valid and that we can see ourselves, we can imagine ourselves on the big screen. And equally important, it told Hollywood there's a lot of money out there, and we can't ignore a whole section of American society.
A lot of people like documentaries because it gives it the raw feeling. And we had like a docu-film, it really gave us the feeling that maybe this is what was really happening in the back scenes, of the street world.
I've never been able to repeat the success of that film. I guess the only one I have to blame for that is myself. One hit is better than none.
Never, ever, ever in our wildest dreams of avarice did we think it would turn out the way it did. Did we think it would be that successful as it was?
People still enjoy the film, and people still have fun with it. Even now, if it's just about laughing at the wardrobe and some of the lines and whatnot, it is still considered a cool film.
It captured an era, and I think it's one of the exceptions because it's important in terms of its iconography and the image that it sort of created. But it's also important, I think, because unlike a lot of movies during that time, it was actually good.